Cersei. The sconce was ajar. It was only off by a little, but enough that she could tell. Had it been that way yesterday? Had someone knocked into it out of sheer clumsiness? Cersei Lannister crept across the room for a closer look, avoiding the glow from the hearth. Stay in the dark. It's safe in the dark. Septim Moel snored loudly in the adjoining chamber, its door left open a crack. Closer, the girl snored more softly in the canopied bed. Or the girl was not asleep at all, and those delicate little breaths were feigned. Cersei didn't know what she dared believe anymore. Not in this new novice, certainly. A maid of 6 and 10, she claimed. Liar. Her breasts betrayed her age as soon as she'd gotten out of those vestments. And she was no maid either. Dornish women are all wanton, and none more so than the one who plays at innocence. Well, whatever game the novice liked to play, it would not trouble Cersei's sleep. What she feared in the dark was him, watching, waiting, for some night perhaps like this. The Valonqar. He had poisoned her son, shot her father, had her daughter maimed. Now her uncle was dead, butchered, and Pycelle too. Worst of all, Jaime was still missing. The imp must have sent his man Darkstar to the Riverlands to steal him away. The creature feasts on his own, like the rat cook, never sated. And I am to be his sweetmeat. They had tripled the guard in the Red Keep. Cersei felt no safer than before. How could Tarly's grunting, shuffling soldiers defend her from a monster that scurried through the very walls? Would they set a man to watch each stone in the ceiling his eyes might peer from? Each garderobe he might emerge from? No. What was needed was 100 more ratters. That, or a pyromancer. With the sconce before her, memories trickled into her mind like warm rain. She knew it of old. She had held it tight that night, as Jaime had thrust so furiously. "Inside me," she had commanded, and he had obeyed. Afterward, they'd laid on the cold stone amongst the rushes, as his seed quickened in her womb. 3 days later, Robert had returned from his hunt, and she opened her legs for him, the clumsy sot. Once again, she placed her hand upon the antlers of iron. The sconces hadn't always borne that design. When Cersei had first come to King's Landing, they'd been dragon claws, adornments fit for a bedchamber that had once been King Maegor's. Robert had ordered them changed, of course, but men's laziness knew no bounds. The new sconces were fixed together in many pieces, but not all that was old had been replaced. Even in the dim light, she could still see scales where the metal met the wall. The antler had sliced open her finger. She remembered that, how it hurt. She remembered the pleasure, too, of Jaime's urgent need. This was where her king was made. My little Tommen. Her third and final child. Robert had wanted more. The Baratheon name was dying, he'd said once, when melancholy had struck him in his cups. Stannis' lone daughter was scarred and sickly, and he was starting to doubt if Renly would ever wed. Cersei had feigned offense. "I'm not a sow to farrow at your pleasure." He had threatened to legitimize his Florent bastard, and the one in the Vale, but she knew those were naught but drunken bluffs. Prince Ears and Princess Mule Girl, she had mocked. And after a bit of blustering, that had been the end of it. 6 and 10 for him, and 3 for you. Her hand clutched the sconce tighter now. Why had she stopped? Why 3? It didn't have to be. Prophecy could be forestalled, Qyburn had assured her. Even now, she was not past bearing age. If she brought forth even a feeble whelp, a twisted whelp, a whelp still it would be. If it drew only a single breath, then she would have a 4th child. 4. And the Valonqar would lose his power. If she remarried, there was a wobble. For a moment, Cersei did not know what had moved. Was it the sconce or the stone? Or her own body shaken with fear? "Your Grace," Nayit whispered. Cersei froze. The novice was awake after all. How long had she been watching her? You should be abed. You need your rest. That much was true. On the morrow, she was to be tried for murder. Except that, when the sun rose, they told her there would be a delay. So it had gone every morning, for a week or more. On the morrow, they promised. On the morrow. Hers was now a life of prayer and reverence. She had been freed from her cell, but her jailers lingered. Septima Well and her 3 novices. They followed her everywhere, the septa droning on about the 7-pointed star, the 7 aspects of grace, the 7 doctrines of illumination. Cersei didn't give 7 figs. The bath was the only escape from the old crow's holy cawing, so the queen dedicated herself to cleanliness. After her morning soak and a second prayer she thought would never end, they brought the king and his kittens to her in the solar. They said I can name a new Kingsguard, Tommen told her, all eagerness. Her little boy was her only window into the world. What they told him, what he overheard. On the affairs of the kingdom, the novices were as good as silent sisters, and the septa's mouths were closed tight as their cunts. All their ears were open, though, beyond a doubt. With false smiles, they feigned interest in the purrs and leaps of Lady Whiskers, and Boots and Sir Pounce, all so they could tell the High Sparrow every word uttered between Cersei and the king. A new Kingsguard. Has Sir Loras succumbed to his wounds? She asked the question with all the concern it required, but she knew the answer before she'd finished. If the White Knight had died, Tommen would be whimpering. Who else could have fallen to leave a position vacant? Could it be... No, she would know already if it was Jaime. She would have felt it. They were one. Sir Osmond had to give his cloak back. Sir Randall said he stained it, but Sir Boris gets stains on his cloak all the time. I told them the washerwoman could clean it, but Lord Randall said Sir Osmond was already gone. He and his brother are sailing to the Wall. Are they going to save a princess from the giants, like Serwyn of the Mirror Shield? Osmond and Osfried have taken the black, then. It was a relief, in truth. Better they confess falsely to betting her than confess truly to something worse. They would join Janis Slynt and 100 other loyal men on the Wall. Lord Janis might have even killed Ned Stark's bastard and risen to Lord Commander by now. Not that it mattered. They were long leagues away, and of little use. There are no giants left, Cersei said, though of that she had her doubts. The skull Qyburn had sent to Dorne in that ebony box had been enormous. Whose was it? At the time she had assumed it was Sir Gregor's, but now she'd seen her new champion. Did Qyburn have friends at the Wall? Janis Slynt himself, perhaps, or some of his old brothers from the Brave Companions? Or did he traffic with those still farther north, sorcerers who sacrificed to queer gods? And tell me, why should wildlings have princesses? They're savages and cannibals. It is for you, and you alone, to father the princesses for the heroes to protect. Tommen seemed disappointed with her answer, but a king must know the truth of the world. Then who is Sir Osmond to guard? That nose of his from frostbite. It was cold enough in King's Landing of late. It made her shiver to think what it was like at the Wall, much less beyond it. Cersei thought it best to change the subject. Lord Randall is the one giving commands, is he? After the deaths of Kevin and Pycelle, Tommen told her the Hand of the King marched south to fight a golden army, whatever that meant. It seemed Sir Harry Swift was gone as well. She hadn't seen him at her uncle's funeral. That left Lord Randall Tarley as the king's chief counselor. The new regent is on her way. My aunt, he says. But I only have uncles. Did he mean my Aunt Selyse? Stannis' shrew? That made no sense. No, before Mace Tyrell rode out the gates, he and Lord Randall must have chosen a new regent to their liking. But who? With her uncle murdered and Cersei facing execution, her kin at Casterly Rock would hardly stand for a Tyrell to rule the kingdom. They would demand one of their blood. They would demand a Lannister. It must be... Aunt Jenna! Cersei let out a bark of laughter that drew Septima Well's gaze. The queen lowered her voice. He means your great-aunt. The scheme was obvious. Make Regent a Lannister of the weaker sex, so the Tyrell men could rule in truth. And just as obviously, They knew nothing of the lioness they planned to cage. Even so, Lady Jenna's arrival was a thing to dread. There would be no more delays once she was here. Sir Kevin's death had only put off the trial until another Lannister could take his place. Should Sir Robert Strong fall on her defense, the Tyrells would still have their Lannister at hand to nod and acquiesce to the High Sparrow as the blade severed Cersei's neck. Tommen made a face. "Do I know Aunt Gemma?" "Jenna! A lion does not forget his pride," the Queen scolded. "She is your grandfather's lady sister, and your cousin Cleos' lady mother, and if what you heard is true, she will be the Lady Regent." "Lord Randall said another lady would arrive tomorrow." "Another?" Lord Randall Tarly loathed women's voices, but it seemed soon he'd have a cunt at each ear. "He called her Nymeria." "Nymeria?" The Queen sniffed. That had been the name of the Stark girl's direwolf. After what it did to Joffrey, Cersei had wanted the bitch's head. She'd wanted the wolf slain too, so she'd settled for that. Jaime would have killed the girl had she'd only told him. He had already thrown the boy from the keep, hadn't he? But the girl was young, still shy of her 10th name day. No older than Mellaria had been. Yet the gods had spit on Cersei's mercy. Arya Stark had been murdered anyway, most like, by some thief or raper on the road. And that wolf, it was off free in the Riverlands, pissing on any tree it pleased. Where was the justice in that? Cersei's eyes went wide as she remembered. Lady Nymeria Sand. Tomorrow, you say? Tommen, don't you see? She leapt to her feet and grabbed the boy, spinning him about in circles. Tommen let out a squeal of laughter that matched the Queen's. The novices began to giggle, and even Septim Moel's prune face managed to smile. They spun and spun until they were both breathless. "Your sister is home!" The next day, the Queen and her holy women were allowed a place on the balcony. Her novices had dressed her in a heavy gown of dark green wool, buttoned up to her neck, and covered her growing golden stubble with a wimple. She kept her head bowed, vigilant against any anger or mirth that might cross her face. Meek. They want meek. Lord Randall Tarly held court below. It was a scant group, hardly befitting a royal assembly. The men all rot in cells, or will rot soon on some battlefield. Among those left behind were Maester Balabar, Lord Alisander Stedman, and old Ardrian Celtigar. For knights, they had Sir Alan Hunt, Sir Elwood Hart, and Horror and Slobber themselves, dressed in their gaudy purple. Sir Willem Withers, too, though he had no little queen at hand to guard. Cersei saw the fools, Moonboy and Butterbumps, and that ancient chief under-jailer. The ladies were there, looking as sweet as nature and art allowed. Jocelyn Swift, Yana Fossway, and Meredith Crane all wore new gowns, and even little Alysanne Bulwer looked presentable enough, while beside her Alice Graceford glowed with motherhood as she cradled little Lana, her new heir. The towering man in the gold cloak could only be Humphrey Waters, the council's choice to lead the city watch. And before them all sat King Tommen, flanked at each side by Sir Meryn and Sir Boris, on his own cushioned bench at the foot of the Iron Throne. "By the Seven! Was everyone murdered?" asked Lady Nymeria, bold as the bastard girl she was. Surrounded by her own retinue of knights, nobles, and even another set of twins, she stood at the front of the gallery, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Her black braid dangled over a robe with a dizzying pattern. "Is that how you came to rule here, Lord Tarly? The last man standing? Or have you merely scared half the court away since taking charge?" A long moment of silence followed. Lord Randall squinted as though he were puzzling over a riddle. The imp's riddle. Lady Nym was the natural daughter of Prince Oberyn Martell, who had defended Tyrion during his trial, and Cersei was all but certain the Red Viper's spawn slithered on the same path. The Queen kept her face calm, unmoving, even as members of the court exchanged wary looks. How will Tarly deal with this unruly trollop? If he was too forbearing, the king's authority would be diminished. Too harsh, and he risked the pledge of Dorne's spears. "King Tommen rules," Lord Randall finally grumbled through clenched teeth. At the mention of his name, Tommen looked as if he were about to speak, but didn't. Lord Tarley is the crown's justiciar, offered Maester Balabar more gently. Lord Mace Tyrell, the hand of the king, has marched south to put down John Connington's brigands. He'll return after his victory there. Yes, singing songs of it as he comes. The Dornish woman stepped forward and scanned the faces in the throne room. Still, I see no master of coin, no master of ships, and no Grand Maester, and I count but 2 Kingsguard, with no Lord Commander. Is this how the crown welcomes House Martell, which comes here as a staunch ally and bearing such fond gifts? Lord Tarley let out an impatient snort, but Maester Balabar met the sally with a wan smile. The business of the crown has been hectic of late. The Lord Treasurer sails for the Free Cities, while the Lord Admiral sails for Old Town, and the Conclave is selecting the new Grand Maester as we speak. The Lord Commander, last we heard, was accepting the surrender of our foes in the Riverlands. Sir Bonifer has knelt already, has he? The Lady Nim's words were sweet with sarcasm. What a swift rebellion! Another conflict in the Riverlands. Could the old knight have declared for Stannis? The Queen was lost, but she read the irritation on Lord Randall's face plain enough. It was Lord Orton Merryweather who had spoken so highly of Sir Bonifer Hasty, boasting that a knight called the Good would be loyal to the end. Mayhaps Lord Orton was as dim as Littlefinger always claimed. We won't discuss Harrenhal here, Lord Randall said brusquely. You can wait until we convene the small council. Nim arched an eyebrow. Our council of 2. How very intimate. Randall Tarley ignored her. You spoke of gifts. Have you brought us spears? Alas, no. By my uncle's orders, the Dornish hosts remain in the Boneway and the Prince's Pass. But we have 3 gifts for the king and his queens. Where, may I ask, are his queens? The Queen Dowager is present. Maester Balabar gestured toward the balcony. She has been anticipating your arrival. Queen Marjorie and her cousins remain in the Maiden Vault, in the custody of the Justiciar. Lady Nym only gave a cursory glance up at Cersei before addressing the king. Your Grace, for your Queen Marjorie, we have brought a rare beast from the mountains of Dorne. One of her entourage came forward dragging a glimmering bronze cage. Within sat a creature with dull brown fur and a face as pink as a newborn babe's. Cousins to the children of the forest, as it is said. Tarley wrinkled his brow, but the king smiled and shouted, A monkey! An ape, your grace. The Dornish woman placed a hand atop the cage. It was a request from the Queen Marjorie's brother, Willis Tyrell. He wrote that she was in search of a replacement for a knight's pet that was slain in battle. An unusual request, to be sure, but these are unusual times, and we are not ones to refuse a queen. She turned again to the king's justiciar. Do you keep a menagerie, Lord Tarley? Besides the one for maidens, I mean. I can make arrangements, said Lord Randall, so stiffly that his jaw moved not an inch. Cersei had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. This brazen girl's father had crippled Willis Tyrell in the lists years ago, and Marjorie had loathed the Dornish ever since. The caged ape was a slight, no doubt. For the king himself, Lady Nymeria continued, may I present Sir Miles Manwoody, brother to Lord Dagos Manwoody. A knight stepped forward who was as large as a bull, with a wild look about him, even for a Dornishman. His surcoat bore a skull and crown, and his face was covered with a thick brown beard in need of grooming. It wasn't the beard of a man who chose to be bearded, but of a man who had simply given up on shaving. Or given up on life altogether. Lord Tarley looked more confused about the man than the monkey. Sir Miles is a gift. The crown requested a new master-at-arms after the untimely demise of Sir Aaron Santigar. A king must be trained as a knight, and since the passing of my father, Sir Miles has been the finest jouster in all Dorne. The crown wanted this. Lord Tarley's eyes met Cersei's, and she gave the slightest of nods. He did not look pleased to pack his court so full of Dornishmen, nor could Cersei blame him. No mirth threatened her face now. The Manwoodies of Kingsgrave? That house was known to revere their ancestors, who had once slain a king. Do they threaten Tommen so brazenly? Sir Miles's lord brother was the one who dressed Prince Oberyn before his battle. These things Cersei did not forget. "We have not had a master-at-arms for some time," said Maester Balabar. "We must thank the Queen Dowager. We must." The Lady Nym looked back up at Cersei, her gaze lingering this time. "In a token of our thanks to her grace, we are pleased to bring the Princess Marcella with us for a short visit. The princess must return home to Dorne in due time, of course, in fulfillment of our agreement with the crown." "Your agreement with the imp?" Cersei dug her nails into her hand. "Curse this bastard bitch and her would-be kingslayer." "I'm aware of that promise," Lord Tarley grumbled. "Is Prince Trystane among you?" "I regret to say that before we were to depart, the prince was shown to have red spots." Lady Nymeria's eyes were still on Cersei. "He remains safe in Dorne." Her captors escorted the queen downstairs to stand before the Dornish retinue. All eyes were on the twins, a pair of tall women with wispy yellow hair. Does the court really need another set? They stepped aside to reveal a girl with a veil drawn across her face. It was a silken thing, Dornish in design, orange blending into red. Opals hung from it, glimmering in the light. All at once, the Lady Nym was solemn. "Your Grace, my uncle, Prince Doran Nymeros Martell of Dorne, laments the villainy of Sir Gerald Dane. May Sir Balon Swan deliver justice to this false knight, just as you delivered justice to Sir Gregor Clegane. Justice would be me crushing your eyes as the mountain did your father's." Large and lustrous as they were, Nym's eyes begged for it. Cersei imagined plucking out the pretty things and squeezing them between her fingers till they burst. She was glad Sir Gregor had fought so valiantly that day against Prince Oberyn, and if Sir Robert Strong fought half so well during her own trial, she will see him. Her heart sank with the realization. Oh, you clever little imp. He had planned for this bastard girl to be here, to look upon the giant Sir Robert with those big dark eyes. Should he prevail, the Dornish would raise a righteous fury over the false skull they'd been sent. They would call the queen a liar, demand her skull next, threaten war unless appeased. Let there be war, she decided. Let all the Dornish perish in their complicity. She would need to convince her Aunt Jenna of that, of course, but what power did the Martells have over House Lannister now? They were fools to give up their hostage. Marcella. Without a word, the queen fell to her knees before the girl. What beauty has been stolen from me? As she lifted the veil to look, the opals rattled. It was worse than she had imagined. Cersei Lannister wanted to scream, but she knew that was what he wanted. For her to weep, to beg, to plead. It was what they all wanted. She could feel their gaze on her. They leered over her naked body. Now they hungered to see her bare her soul as well. They can't. They won't. Tears were welling, but she would not let them fall. She closed her eyes. Stay in the dark. It's safe in the dark. When she was ready, she stood. Her eyes snapped open. "Lord Randall, may I ask that she remain veiled until she has fully recovered? It is not for a princess to be gawked at. And this talk of red spots worries me. Let her be kept apart from his grace for the nonce. We must not gamble with the king's health." Tarley considered the request with a scowl of suspicion. "Done," he finally said, and soon the court was dismissed. That night, after her bath and a grueling seventh prayer, the queen lay abed. Echoing through the bedchamber were the snores of Septim Moel, especially fierce this evening, a cacophony of clacks and wheezes that started and stopped without rhythm. Even on his drunkest night, Robert had never been so loud. Nyit was beside her, pretending to sleep again. Dorne. Cersei brooded as she glared at the girl. Dorne everywhere I look. Listening. Scheming. The girl's breasts rose and fell with each breath. The nipples poked through her bedrobe in the cold. The queen wondered what Nyit would do should she begin to pleasure herself, right beside her, here and now. Would she still pretend to slumber? Not to hear her? Not to feel the shaking bed? Would she report it all to Septim Moel, to the High Sparrow, straight to the imp himself? No doubt it would arouse all three. And what would happen if Cersei slid her hand between the little novice's legs instead? Would she even bother to protest? To play at resistance? Dornish women are all wanton. Nait's little breaths went in and out, and Cersei was reminded of her mother. Lady Joanna Lannister had known Lady Nymeria's grandmother, Obella Martell, the Princess of Dorne. They had been friends, and more than friends, fellow ladies-in-waiting to Princess Rhaella Targaryen. They dressed her. They bathed her. They shared her bed. What else might they have shared? She was certain Elia Martell and Ashara Dane had been lovers, and Lady Ashara had been her lady-in-waiting. Had that been the true motive for her leap from that tower? Ned Stark telling her what Sir Gregor had done to her princess. The Queen considered what she could do to this Dornish girl. It would be an easy thing to run one hand down Nait's stomach, over her hair until she came at last to her mound. She would begin gently, and then, when she was good and wet, she would go harder and harder, and when the novice was close to climax, Cersei's other hand would grab her by the throat and strangle the life from the spying little slut. It was a gratifying thought, but the corpse. There was nowhere to dump the corpse. A loud clack sounded from Septa Moel's throat. Nait stirred, then opened her deep blue eyes. "Your Grace, you're still awake." Her voice was gentle. "Is it your daughter that troubles you?" "It is my want of one that troubles me." "I fear for her. She was disfigured by that fiend Darkstar, stripped of all her beauty." Her smile was gentle too. "Only the beauty of the flesh. Marcella's soul remains vibrant and pure." That was empty prattle, she knew. In Cersei's experience, the soul took the shape of the flesh, as wine took the shape of the bottle. And how else? It had no other shape to take. If an ugly maid wasn't born bitter, she would be made so by her ugliness, till bitterness made her ugly, within and without. The sound-bodied man grew brave and self-assured, the weak-bodied cowardly and self-loathing. Weren't her own brothers the best examples? Jaime and Tyrion looked just like what they are. And so did Cersei. Bold and strong and beautiful. That was what the world saw in Cersei Lannister, and that was what she was inside. Jaime would praise her when they lay together. Her brilliant eyes, her full lips, her golden hair. It annoyed her. Her face was his face, she told him, and when he praised her, he merely praised himself. And so he complimented her mind, but there was no division to be made in the beauty he saw there, no way to pull the salt from the soup. They were one. His mind and her body. His body and her mind. One flesh, one soul, one perfect being. She couldn't expect the novice to understand that, so she simply said, "I only hope for my daughter's happiness." "Hope is good. Hope is the mother's gift to her children," says the seven-pointed star. "For what they dream is what they craft." That was an unsettling thought. She dreamt of naught but death. "You're from Dorne. Do they stare at the maimed there, in the streets?" "I would be lying if I said the injured do not draw eyes, but it is our way to give them dignity, so they never have to beg. Under Dornish law, they must be housed and fed by their lords." Cersei knew little of Dornish law, but it had been in her thoughts since she learned of Marcella's return. Grand Maester Pycelle had studied it extensively, and she'd heard him say that few were so familiar as he with its twists and convolutions, though she'd thought the old boar was just boasting. The details escaped her, but he'd had occasion over the years to drone on about whether the edicts of Gaiman Palehair would have strengthened the realm, or whether Queen Maria Martell should have pressed her husband for reforms. Now she wished she'd paid the old fool more heed. But one point stuck with her. Under Dornish law, lands and titles passed to the eldest child, not the eldest male. Just so, if Dornish law applied to all 7 kingdoms, Marcella would be queen, and your Grace, the Lady of Casterly Rock. "I am the Lady of Casterly Rock," Cersei reminded herself to keep her temper. "Of course. But your brothers could not contest your Grace's claim." The novice had a point. Jaime was a knight of the Kingsguard and could hold no lands, but in these shameful times, It seemed that men could quit the King's Guard. Sir Barristan had done just that, as had Sir Boros and Sir Osmond. Should Jaime break his vow, he might claim the rock as his birthright, just as his father had always desired. And who would back her claim against her brothers? But twins or no, it was recorded fact that Cersei had been born first. If the firstborn child was heir, it was she, and she alone. Then there was the imp. He might emerge from the shadows and press a claim on the rock at any time. Would Stannis or the Ironborn support his vile claim over hers? Why not? For all the gold he'd promised them. In truth, this Dornish law would fix so many problems. With Marcella queen, Cersei would be free of Mace Tyrell and Randall Tarley and Paxter Redwine. Her daughter could choose a new hand, a new justiciar, a new Grand Admiral. Safe upon a throne at Casterly Rock, away from sparrows and reachers and Dornish, she could blot out this ill-writ page of her life's history and begin again. If only Lady Nym had brought home Marcella instead of Rosamund. Tyrion had played one of his tricks before he ever sent Marcella south. The Sputter had told Cersei about it. Septa Eglantine would darken Marcella's hair, and Rosamund would play the princess. It was clever, though she was loath to admit it. A way to keep her daughter safe from Stannis' pirates on the journey, and from Dornish daggers once she arrived. So clever that she'd taken it for herself. What was good for the lioness was good for the lion. Thus she had schemed to spirit away a brown-haired Tommen to be fostered at Rosby, though that plan fell to pieces all too soon. But she'd never thought the girls would keep up the game so long. If Lady Nym herself did not know the true princess, who did? False names and dubious tales. How long can a child stay hidden? A long time, it seemed. She thought back to the sconce. What did it matter that it had been replaced? She recalled that in the great sept of Baelor there was a tapestry of the crone that was said to have been woven by Baelor the Blessed himself. Only according to Pycelle, it hadn't been. A misplaced candle had destroyed King Baelor's work during the reign of the second King Jaehaerys, and a replica hastily made to take its place. A few septons and maesters knew the truth, those who had pored over the records, but with no one else the wiser. And what of it? Did it not still light the way for those who believed? But a princess cannot just hang upon a wall. Keeping up the ruse in Dorne was one thing. Here in the Red Keep, it wouldn't be long before she was discovered for who she truly was. To most of the court she was a stranger, but half the servants knew her face. Then there were Sir Meryn and Sir Boros, and of course, Tommen. Cersei's red spots ruse might keep them apart a few days, a week, but soon Tommen would demand to see his sister. He'd want to talk to her, play with her, look beneath the veil. And what brother could fail to know his sister's face? It makes no matter, said Cersei. Dornish laws for Dorne. Perhaps your grace could visit then, and see for herself, suggested Nait. Return with the princess after your trial. If I live. Why wouldn't you? The gods defend the innocent. Of course, as the lords defend their small folk. Nait giggled. We are but players in the Father's plan, lords and small folk alike. It would be like the Father to scheme against me. His plan. What of my own choices? Your Grace's choices. They are made freely, free as a bird in the wind. We can choose to fly with the Father, or against him. But his plan is in the air, a storm, as unstoppable as it is just. That is the nature of destiny, and we only suffer working against his will. Don't we all suffer in a storm? Nait suggested they rest, and the queen consented. After all, on the morrow, she was to be tried for murder. The novice closed her eyes again, but it was not until the hour of the nightingale that Cersei could be sure she was asleep. It was then she rose from the bed and crept across the room. Cersei Lannister grasped the sconce and gave it a twist. There was a rumble, loud, but not half so loud as Septa Moel's snores. There, at the back of the hearth, a square of black appeared where there had been stone. Beyond the flames, she saw the way.